Join us for this week's One Man's Dreamboat segment with Florida Sportsman Boating editor George Labonte as we feature anglers who have already launched their dream. Florida Sportsman began these features 30 years ago, and the dreams just keep getting better.
This week we meet up with Robert Fleming and his son RJ to have a look at their 32 Seacraft, which was restored at MCU. Now, I had a chance to look at this boat a couple of times in the restoration process, but I hadn't seen it finished, and I was very excited to see how it turned out. Now, Robert's previous boating experience was mainly inshore. In fact, he came out of a flats boat to buy this boat. But after a few trips to the offshore grounds with some of his friends, he decided that a blue water boat was definitely going to be quickly in his future.
I purchased a 32 Seacraft probably 4.5, 5 years ago for $42,000. Seeing it online, it looked like it was in great condition. I came down, we did a sea trial. I realized the guy didn't know anything about the boat, and I don't think the guy ever even took the boat out, so I figured it had hardly any hours on it. At the time, this seemed like a good buy until we got it home and realized it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, so.
Having never done a project like this before, Robert had no idea what he was getting into, but it was quickly becoming apparent that this was going to be a lot more than he had expected from the outset.
I brought it down because I was going to do the Armstrong bracket and close the transom in. And then talking to Brian, and then it just totally blew up from there. 10 minutes of being with him, he picked the boat apart. The interior was trashed. The boat had never been in a shed, nothing. Sit in the sun its whole life. So everything about the boat, the appearance, I mean, structurally it was good, but appearance-wise it looked like it was all faded out. Stitching was going, boat needed everything.
After coming to the realization of what actually needs to be done, it was time to start tearing into the boat. Prior to tackling this restoration, Robert had heard stories about how Seacrafts were notorious for sinking.
That's what started the whole process of wanting to close the transom in and put the bracket on. So I started doing a little more research, and that's how I ran across the Armstrong bracket. Well, the biggest benefit we gained was before we closed the transom in, the ladder clipped on the back of the original transom of the boat. Have you ever climbed up at a negative degree? It's almost impossible to get into that particular Seacraft the way it was designed before, because as you're climbing up, it's pushing you away from the boat. Putting the bracket on, and then that new ladder they have now where it goes inside the bracket is awesome. Well, the boat originally only had 300 gallons of fuel. It had 250-gallon tanks, so I knew I wanted more fuel. So when I was talking to Brian, he's like, well, we probably ought to check the fuel tanks anyway. And I said, well, if we're gonna check them, we might as well replace them. So at that point, that's when I came up with the idea I wanted to put the 400-gallon fuel tank in the middle. We gained 2 fish boxes, which are 3.5 feet wide by 10 foot long now, that I didn't have before, or dry storage. They are insulated, so you could use them as coolers, fish box, whatever. One nice thing about it is now you don't have to, when you do catch a fish, you don't have to put it in coffin box in the front of the boat, which is where we keep all our drinks. We kind of use that as our hold and ice chest. And as we catch fish, we put them in one of the side fish boxes and we throw ice on the fish. So it keeps the mess to the back of the boat. The other biggest feature is before our live well was in the floor. So you were on your hands and knees trying to dip a bait, and now it's up top. So you're standing there, you don't have to bend over or nothing. So it's 100 times better. It used to have to put the anchor underneath the bow. I had him cut the bow of the boat out up top, make my anchor lid, put a tube in so you can drop the chain in, lock the anchor in.
With all of the major structural work out of the way, it was time to turn Brian loose on the cosmetics, the fun part, if you will.
Honestly, what I love about the boat the most is the dash and the electronics. I mean, by far, I think that's what he does the best. There's nothing you see coming out of a manufactured boat right now, for sure. The paint is crazy. Everybody up around where we live thinks it's an FWC boat. So they look at it at first, and then they wonder if they're getting pulled over second, because they're thinking we're gonna jump out with a badge. But yeah, the stripe, everybody walks up and they're rubbing the stripe. They're like, that's a decal? I'm like, no, that's painted on, and it's faded. And they're like, wow. I mean, they're just blown away by that. I mean, Brian's guys did an awesome job there. I mean, he couldn't ask for a better paint job.
Now this boat is rigged up to fish a number of different fisheries, and it's set up to handle all different kinds of scenarios, from bottom fishing to offshore big water trolling. More important than the fishability of the boat, this was going to provide Robert an opportunity to spend a lot of quality time with his son, which was very important to him when he decided to undertake this project.
Now that it's done, I'd like to build something else because that's me. But as far as, I mean, yeah, it is I would build the same thing again, for sure. Maybe some different power, more power, to get some more speed out of the boat. But for the most part, I don't think I'd change much of nothing.
Robert's boat was one of the cleanest I've ever seen, and I'm sure all these SureHold products that we presented him with are going to help him keep it that way. Robert made it clear to us that he really likes the customization of whether it's a truck or a boat or anything in his life. He's into building stuff, and he started out with a plain old Seacraft, but what he ended up with was certainly custom, and I'm sure something that's going to give him enjoyment until the next project comes along.
After purchasing the boat for $42,000 and spending $200,000 on repairs and custom modifications, the cost of Robert's Dreamboat comes to a total of approximately $242,000.